Chairman, we're now live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Resident Services Select Committee. My name is Councillor Wayne Bridges and I'm Chairman of this meeting. The key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. And for those in the public gallery, you will not be on camera. A reminder to councillors, officers and those speaking today that you should turn your microphone button on when speaking. This will ensure you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. Quick housekeeping rules, if I may. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening. However, if one does go, please follow the officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting point, which is the Civic Centre forecourt. Mobile devices to be placed on silent or switched off, and we also have resident feedback forms available if we have members of the public here this evening. Before we move on to the main agenda, I would also like to inform the committee of some changes to our process going forward and how we conduct this meeting. So following consultation with the Labour Lead and all current members of the Resident Services Select Committee, I will be adjusting the format of our meetings for the current meeting cycle as of this evening. With the exception of major reviews and budget-related topics, all items, unless requested by a member of this committee, will be considered without an officer introduction or presentation, in order to allow the maximum time available for full scrutiny by elected members. This new approach is done on the assumption that all members have read the content of the reports in advance of the meeting taking place. Officers will be given the opportunity to summarise and make any comments at the end of each agenda item. And for the benefit of those present and also watching online, I would kindly request that members make reference to page numbers and specific paragraphs when referring to the reports. Looking at our agenda this evening, we will have presentations on our gating in Hillingdon, item 5, and also the crime and disorderly scrutiny, police performance data, item 6. All other items this evening will go straight to questions from members. With that said, we start with apologies for absence, please.
Apologies have been received from Councillor Punja. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any declaration of interest in matters coming before this meeting? I can see no indications. Thank you. Item 3 is to receive the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 8. Are they agreed? Thank you very much. I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in Part 1. There are no Part 2 items to be considered. With that said, we go on to our next item, a review of alligating in Hillingdon with our witness session, pages 9 to 24. And we welcome this evening Helena Neil from our community engagement team, and Yasmin and Eleni from Ealing Council. Good evening and welcome to you both. So perhaps we could start with you, Helena, to introduce this, and we'll go on to the witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you. As a way of introduction, this is the third and final witness session feeding into the committee's review of the council's alligating scheme. In the two previous witness sessions, we heard from residents in two areas where alligates had been installed, and we also heard from a team leader in the council's Antisocial Behaviour team and also a police perspective. This evening we're very pleased to be joined by Eleni Yangu, Crime Reduction Project Officer, and Yasmin Westerfield, Safer Community Team Leader, both from the London Borough of Ealing. A succinct overview of the Ealing gating scheme, including a process flow chart, has been very helpfully provided, and they'll be able to clarify any information and answer queries so we can learn from their experiences as well.
Thank you very much. Yasmin and Eleni, would you like to comment?
Hi, my name's Ellie and this is Yasmin. We're from Ealing, and we've come to just share how we do our alleyway gating scheme at Ealing Council, and to help support your review of your alleyway gating scheme. We're here to answer any questions you may have about our scheme.
If you can just switch it up, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. In that case, we'll go straight to questions then. If I can have questions from members, please, on the items. See no indications. Councillor Sullivan.
Reading your report was very interesting. I just wanted to know whether the council actually keeps council actually keeps records of the key holders for the gating system. Let me start again. Does the London Borough of Ealing keep records of this gating system and key holders' details? Is that? Thank you.
So for GDPR purposes and data protection, we do keep information when the scheme when they make the application and when the scheme is ongoing and when it's completed. But after around a year, we don't hand out that information just as due to the rate of like houses being sold and things like that. So we wouldn't share the lead resident. We keep the lead resident's information for a short period of time, but after around a year, we wouldn't hand that out to other residents just for the fact of, you know, they might have sold up.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard from residents in previous witness sessions. One of the sort of issues that have been raised is to do with issues about bank accounts and when they sort of get frozen, so they can't get access to them. We've heard about the issue about the keys and people moving on and these sorts of things. I'm just curious as to how Ealing Council supports residents where they come across these obstacles, and if they do, and how they do that.
So in terms of issues with bank accounts, Ealing Council gift every alley gate. So in terms of we bear the full cost for each installation. Ongoing costs are then, so if the gate was to break, the residents would be responsible in the maintenance fees. So we don't have the same issues in terms of bank accounts. In terms of the keys, we use the same contractor who keeps the record of each gate, so they can get, we will provide the residents with the details of the contractor, so if they do need to procure a key, they can do, they just need to consult with us so we can confirm that they are indeed the resident of that property and that they have right of way to the alleyway, and then they can go directly to our contractor and procure a key. Although often how we tend to encourage residents is to just have a conversation with their neighbour. Of course, that's not always possible if there's been a breakdown in relationships, which is where we would then direct them back to the contractor and say, if you go onto the land registry, we can check the land registry and see that you have right of way, which means you are eligible for a key, and that's generally how we tend to manage those situations.
Councillor Farley, do you wish to follow up?
Thank you, Chair. When I was talking about the bank accounts, this is the bank accounts that the residents set up in order to provide ongoing maintenance for the gates. So when you get to a situation where the bank account hasn't been used for some period of time, or the treasurer moves away, or whatever it might be, the setup that's initially been set up for that bank account, and then it gets frozen. It's more how, or if Ealing Council assists in any way to facilitate unlocking it or doing something to enable maintenance to take place through the bank account.
So all of our applications, they are required to be 100% on private land, and we require 100% consent from all home and land owners. If anything, what we put a lot of onus on the residents from the moment they apply. So we do encourage them to do these things like create a group bank account or create a resident association, but at the end of the day we leave it up to the residents because it is their land essentially. We don't gate anywhere that isn't seen as like a hotspot for ASB crime or enviro crime. So for them to be gifted a gate, it means that it's a necessity, and then like they are pretty willing to take onus. If it ever does fall down, we do try and again push it onto the residents to build their community, to make it strong, and work with each other to rebuild that. so far we haven't had, whilst I've been in place, something that's broken down to an extent where we've had to step in. But if it was that necessary, then we can. And yeah.
I think, in fairness, we haven't come across that scenario as yet, where they haven't been able to draw from the account. Generally, we find with our residents, it is one resident who sets up a bank account, or they use their bank account and generally use bank transfers. I haven't come across a group bank account for maintenance as yet.
Councillor Smallwood.
Chair, I'm afraid Councillor Barley asked the question I was going to ask.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. You said under the legal implications it said that 100% consent is obtained from all the homeowners. Before they're gifted an alley-gate. How many do you know roughly on hand how many applications are therefore rejected, or how many aren't put in place because there isn't 100% ownership there? For example, there might be multiple occupancy home or something there, or where the owner of that house doesn't live in the area perhaps, or doesn't mind what happens there, or doesn't want to consent to maintaining anything additional to his particular space. How many on average are rejected on that basis, and do you think it makes an impact, especially in areas which are crime hotspots?
I don't have the specific numbers at this time, but when it comes to consent, if they haven't provided 100% consent, we will liaise with them and find out why. If there is reasons like the landlord isn't around, then we can look at other routes. For example, like if they're not around because they are abroad and one of those people, we can speak to managing agents, or we can speak to whoever is in the property, and we just on occasions we have written up like documents just to say, we did do this without one person's consent, but we make it clear to the lead resident that that person is required a key and the tenants need to be updated, and we do push for the landlord. But again, that would only be in cases where the ASB, the crime, the enviro crime is so severe that it needs to be gated. Otherwise, we would just reject it. For the simple fact it's only private land and it is a gift that we give to residents.
I think of late we've had 2 where we've had to reject it. It's actually not been residents, it's been where developers have an interest in the land and they won't give consent as they're unsure what their plan is going forward with the land. So we've had one in the Southall area of the Borough of Ealing and one in the Northfields area. Both, as I said, developers had a stake in the land. Generally, with Ellie's hard work, she does get the residents to all consent eventually, because ultimately it reduces the risk of residential burglary to their property, fly tipping next to their home, youth congregating, Class A drug users congregating, again, causing risk to their property. So ultimately, they do recognise it is for the greater good. As Ellie said, however, sometimes with the landlords, we will go without, if it's only one person and we just cannot contact them, we will gate without consent. But it has to be that the ASB is at a level that it supersedes it, essentially.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you. I just wondered whether you monitor the ASB before alley gates and after alley gates, and whether you find, and what kind of impact you find that they actually do have in reducing antisocial behaviour.
So each year when we complete the scrutiny reports, we do look specifically, myself, I look specifically at gating. I have explored 2 areas whilst I've been in post. One was in Ealing, where we gated a really large area that was unfortunately a place where burglary was occurring all the time. And yeah, after a year there was a significant decrease in the crime of burglary in that area. We also looked at a gating order that was installed many years ago in Southall, because once it expired, then it put a PSPO in place, because once the gating order had expired and been removed, the ASB in crime had gone from pretty low level to an increase, and then now the PSPO is in place, it's gone back down. So yeah, we do monitor that at least every year.
So we don't do it for every scheme, because we do quite a few. However, where there was significant ASB prior to the gates, we will go back and look at a reduction, specifically around drug use in the area, burglary, and sexual offences as well.
Do you wish to follow up, Councillor Maud? Okay. Thank you very much. Our own officers, Helena and Neil, do you wish to comment on anything that's been discussed so far? Are you happy with that?
No, we just wanted to thank colleagues in Ealing for taking the trouble in terms of inputting into the review and attending this evening as well.
Thank you very much for your attendance this evening, and we're going to move on to our next item, so if you wish to go.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Item 6 is the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Police Performance Data, pages 25 to 42. For this item we have Chief Inspector James Herring, Jacqueline Robertson, and we was meant to have Inspector Dan Lipinski. I don't recognise him here this evening, sorry, so I can't see your nameplate there.
Sorry, it's James McGann. I'm here in place of Dan Lipinski.
Thank you. Jackie, I don't know if you're going to give a talk or whether the officers wish to give a talk, but if not, we'll move straight to questions. If we could use the microphone, please.
Yeah, if it's all right. Sorry, my name's James Herring. I'm one of two neighbourhood chief inspectors covering the whole of West area, which includes Hillingdon Borough. Just thought I'll start off just saying a couple of points, and I'll invite some questions if you want from the figures. So everyone is probably aware of the new commission, not so new commissioners, turnaround plan, which is a full swing now after having consultation, and of particular relevance to us is Principle 1 or Pillar 1, we will have the strongest ever neighbourhood policing. And some of that is certainly starting to affect the trust and confidence, and part of the plan there, whereby each borough now in London will have its own senior leader, a superintendent, and that will be the senior officer in charge of partnership with that borough. And I'm pleased to say this is the second week where we have it, and for Hillingdon that would be Superintendent Anthony Bennett. In the more medium term, there'll certainly be an increase in PCSOs, and in the longer term we hope to have an increase in police officers, but those numbers have not yet been finalised. Trust and confidence uplift also we'll talk about, and has certainly come out of the Baroness Casey review, about where we are having an uplift in our professional standards unit, our capacity around anti-corruption, domestic abuse team, and review of all the cold cases and the cases we've had going on before. Certainly the priorities in West area and Hillingdon continue to be on violence in general, so that's all violence offences, with particular attention for violence against women and girls, and the figures we have all been circulated to everybody. It is also a year on since we've had the town centre team, which I believe has been a great success, and unfortunately this year we will be losing the partnership tasking team, so that's 10 PCs who do a very valuable job, or have done a very valuable job for the residents of Hillingdon. So that's just an opening gambit by me, and if you want I can talk through some of the crime performance figures and take questions, or however you want to do it, Chair.
Happy for you to go through the stats briefly if you wish to do so, and then we'll take the questions.
Okay, if it's all right with you, I won't go line by line.
No, not line by line, but the summary, thank you.
Is that all right? We will be here quite some time. So if we go to the point on the crime performance, I'll just give some highlights there. Sadly to say there's been quite an uplift in inquisitive crimes. That includes robbery, burglary, vehicle and theft offences and arson. And if you look across at the MPS data, we still in the borough are not performing as well as we should do. But the positive highlights are certainly around drug, possession of offensive weapons and antisocial behaviour. There's a significant decline, and if you look across against the MPS figures, that is certainly doing well there. And also knife with injury, we're doing very well there compared to the MPS average, as it were. There are some notable exceptions around pedocycle-enabled crime and moped-enabled crime, and we certainly, I think, might have some good news stories about that afterwards around that. So the ward crimes, sorry to see that Heathrow Villages there's been a distinct percentage increase there. One of the ways we are analysing this, and I have a meeting later this month with colleagues from Specialist Operation Aviation Policing, is due to a lot of the flights and the opening hours of Heathrow, it's assessed that there are a lot more passengers and people using hotels, which could have an impact on the Heathrow Villages figures, and we do have some resourcing issues which we are finalising to increase around that area as well. The good news is around Hillingdon East, Charville, Ickenham South and Harefield, and certainly Ruislip Manor in the last 12 months have seen some quite significant drops in the crimes that the wards are reporting. The last 3 months gives a somewhat similar figure, although there are some changes. Hillingdon East and Ruislip Manor continue to drop in crime, and that's a positive gain for what we're doing and what efforts we're making here. Any questions so far? Violence against women and girls, that is certainly a priority for our BCU commander and certainly for all of the boroughs within London, and we have a number of initiatives, part of the Trust and Confidence Plan, of certainly helping with the violence against women and girls, and that was particularly emphasised with the Met-wide, I believe national-wide, the Neighbourhood Police Week of Action, and we had a lot of initiatives to support women and girls, and I do believe I went out with one of the councillors on a walk and talk where we supported the local women folk in an area that was deemed to be unsafe. So we are working very strongly with the community and certainly working with our female officers to improve the trust and confidence, certainly targeting those who are contributing to violence against women and girls. If we go on to the next slide in terms of iCall performance, so just to clarify, an iCall is where police are required to attend in quick time, and it's difficult to comment on that because the figures do have some similarity from the year before. I'd just like to tailor-make that since August last year through till December, right across the Met, we had significant challenges around resourcing, and the Commissioner certainly stepped in with Operation Stabilise, and consequently I had to, the neighbourhood policing had to help out regularly with the emergency response teams, but we're in a much better position come December through January this year. There were quite a number of significant impacts to that in terms of neighbourhood policing took quite a hit, and we had to supply officers to help the response team. But at that same time, we had sadly the Queen's funeral, and also we had probably the Met's biggest IT infrastructure plan implemented, which caused a number of distractions, which is not always helpful when you're having to do your core duty for getting to immediate calls. And that similar can be said for S-calls, which will be lesser important, but still every police call is important, and the performance figures there are fairly similar in some way, although you'll see towards what I said in the last sort of quarter that has been affected. Any questions so far? Stop and search is a particular issue that we are dealing with, and it's certainly come out of the Baroness Casey review report and also with the turnaround plan. We have a number of initiatives where we have youth scrutiny groups, we have monitoring groups where stop and search body-worn video is examined or dip samples, and every time we have a Section 60, which is Criminal Justice Public Order Act put in place where that allows officers not to use reasonable grounds, and that's normally due to extreme violence of an area where there have been weapons. We will have a review afterwards to see the impact of that in terms of the date, the time, the areas, and we invite comment from the community along those lines as well. We're doing a lot of initiatives with the members of the community around training new recruits, and this is all to help reduce the disproportionality of some of the figures which may be outplayed in some of the facts that got in front of you. In terms of good attitudes, the officers are taking this on board, and I think we are having a number of successes compared to what is normally outplayed in the public or around the media. Are there any questions for Stop and Search?
I'll take questions at the end, Chief Inspector. Thank you.
I shall leave it at that then, Chair, if that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our first question is from Councillor Gardner.
I'll be talking about violence against women and girls, as you know. I did go to the event that you were at, but there wasn't a very good take-up, to be perfectly honest with you. There was a few women turned up. What worries me, excuse me, is the trust that the community women that I deal with, a variety of communities, some of them come from countries where the police are corrupt and they're not to be trusted in the first place. So with all the publicity about the Met, it's like a double whammy, basically. It's very, very difficult to try and get people to go and speak to the police. Also, I noticed that most of the DV victims, both male and female actually, that I've dealt with, have also been raped, but they don't regard it as a crime. From some communities, they think that if you're married to somebody, you're their possession. And I wonder how you can sort of work around that one. Also, I think that there should be, I mean, it's not down to you basically, but should be the same police patrolling the areas, because you've got, a few years ago when we had the PCSOs and the individual wards, people got to know and trust the police officers. Now they're different police all the time. I'm just trying to work out how you're going to actually gain the trust, because it's not one community. I mean, the area I'm in, you know, there's lots of different communities, and I'm just trying to work how you're going to break through the barriers on that. I mean, I get on really well, but A, probably because I'm a bit odd, and B, they don't see me as any sort of authoritative figure. I will talk to people and give them choices, but I wonder how the police are going to cope with that.
Thank you, Janet. It was there are several questions there, but what I'll try and address is the most important one. So, what the Commission has done and is treating trust and confidence very seriously is to appoint a senior officer, a superintendent for each borough now, and so we're in week 2, and each superintendent now is taking a specific set of priorities. We're building trust and confidence with all the communities within London, and in this case Hillingdon, very seriously, and they are coming up with ideas and plans to work with all the communities and certainly all the police officers and the PCSOs to enable that trust to come back again. We know we've made mistakes. We apologise for the mistakes we made, and certainly recruitment and retention is an issue, and we are working internally to identify areas where we can improve on to get that consistency approach which you talked about before. Unfortunately, there's going to be quite a lot of bad news to follow, and we apologise for that, but if we trust what the Commission is saying and what we're doing, and have some patience with the community, we are doing all what we can to rebuild that trust and do that as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner, do you wish to? Okay. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you. I think the Commissioner deserves credit for fronting the problems that face the Met Police and flushing them out, and not hiding away from it. And I think this committee should be pleased with that. But one of the things I wanted to ask around Stop and Search, and one of the things that struck me when we saw this in a Safer Neighbourhood Board, is actually if you were to read the press's media, you'd expect it to be it's mainly young black men who are carrying knives and being stopped and searched, and the ones that are being arrested. But actually, the figures show that there is quite a cross section of people being arrested, being found with firearms, with knives. It isn't just one community, and I just wondered how we are able to communicate that more, as the police are able to communicate it, but also how we can support that, and then how that then connects into the most serious of crimes. So when people are actually stabbed or people are actually murdered, and the statistics of the demographics of people that are committing those crimes. Because I was struck at how there was such a cross section of people when it comes to stop and search that are being arrested, and it's not the one group that you sometimes hear the media potentially not picking on, but telling you that it is committing those crimes. Thank you.
I think actually you do raise a very good point. I think a lot of what we're doing, the police cannot do this all ourselves, and we have a very good relationship with the council, particularly with Jackie Robertson. We work hard with all communities and all partners to ensure that when we have good news stories of both enforcement and engagement across the community, we will advertise as much as we can, and we do have some examples we can share with you afterwards. But in terms of stop and search, there are a lot of factors that will affect stop and search. Hillingdon has its issue with all sorts of communities, and what we do is the police are trying to engage as much as we can through outreach programs, through engagement programs, working with the community to try and expose the values of positive mental attitude and having that mindset of looking after each other. And try to do away with it. I know one of the PCs on our team has done a lot of work, and I don't know if Janet knows it, around personal safety for women, and that has been quite a success, and we're trying to roll that out across West Area as well. But there are going to be some people, Councillor, that you won't be able to stop carrying weapons, and we will hope to try and get to those as often as we can and prevent crime.
Councillor Small, do you wish to follow up?
Yeah, just in terms of comms and how we can do it, how important do you and the people in West Area find things like OWL and the significance that they have in helping you do their job to help sort of potentially tackle some of those things that you've just very eloquently spoken about?
OWL is a very useful tool. We are looking, and certainly in the turnaround plan, we're looking at data and technology, and what we're trying to do is not restrict ourselves with essentially one platform. Certainly our Ealing colleagues aren't here. We talked last night at Ealing Safer Neighbourhood Board about Nextdoor, and we are trying to look at alternative methods, and this is where we are humble. We are not as high-tech as perhaps we should be, and engaging with all the communities, and perhaps looking at other platforms at social media to try and get the messages across that we want to, and have that greater sense of engagement across all the communities. So things like Nextdoor, enhancing our Twitter, Facebook and other platforms is certainly the way we're looking forward. And I'm leading a project with external media communications at the moment across West Area, where one of our priorities is to expose the good news that all our officers are doing to counter that narrative that you quite accurately described, which seems to be in the press all the time, which is quite negative. Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. Carrying on from what Councillor Gardner said, we used to have the police in our area where everybody knew them. They were visible. There was a community policing, and this is something I feel needs to be addressed, because we don't see the same police patrolling our area, and sometimes we don't see any police. So I wonder if that is something you can look into for us, please. Thank you.
Yes, certainly resourcing has been a major issue. It may be no surprise, but the Commissioner does make a lot of visits to police station and listen to the grassroots and the young PCs at all ages. He certainly visited Uxbridge a couple of weeks ago and did hear that was some of the issues that we are facing. The issue that we have is that trying to retain police officers sometimes is also quite problematic, and what we're trying to do is assess around the recruitment and the retention issue to try and keep people, and then keep our neighbourhood officers in post longer. We're trying to recruit more and more every week, and one of my plans as the Chief Inspector is to make sure that levels of police officers and PCSOs is kept consistent. But there are lots of external factors that sometimes thwart that, but it is certainly a major driver on the BCU and West area to try and keep neighbourhood officers in post as DWOs with their PCSOs as much as we can under the constraints we have.
Councillor Sullivan, do you wish to have a supplementary?
Yeah, just one more question. Maybe you could keep the older police officers who are about to retire in the DWO roles, and they would have more rapport with people like us, I don't know, with the community.
We try to keep all police officers of all ages in their posts. I accept your point. We also face the challenge with the younger officers, and the challenges that we have. We certainly have a lot of young officers coming into service now, and it is widely advertised within the Baroness Casey review in terms of the inexperience we have at the lower end of the age group, and the impact that they have when they're dealing with quite serious offences and incidents, and that can have that effect on their well-being and their health, as it were. But in answer to your question, we would like to try and maintain levels of all police officers of all ages.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I want to echo what colleagues on the committee have said about at least the presence of officers on the streets. It's a common theme that comes up with residents. We don't see officers, but it's good to hear that PTSOs are on the way and officers, so that's good. I'd like to ask about the call performances on page 34 and 35, just so I some clarity. These numbers, and so the I is like a 999 and the S is 101? Is that the equivalent? Am I saying that correct?
It's the assessment of what the nature of the call is. So an I grade has to be dealt with in 15 minutes, and an S call within 1 hour.
Okay. So
and those are parameters that we in the West area don't set. They're set by the Metropolitan Police.
Okay. So these are the response to a call. Okay, that's fine, because I wasn't sure if this was calls being answered, and whether or not you had a sort of a statistic on calls coming in, how quickly they're answered, because another complaint is, particularly with the 101, the wait that there is to be answered, and there is sometimes a bit of a push to go online. Again, there's an issue there with digital exclusion, older people that don't have access to internet functionality. But I was curious about whether you record sort of like drop calls, so like the percentage of how many calls you're getting in and how many are not actually being answered, or just going off, because it links in then with the sort of under-reporting of crime if people are not able to get in contact with somebody and actually report it in the first place.
Drop calls, abandoned calls, they would be recorded. We wouldn't have those figures, but the Met CC, the control command, would have those figures. So they would record the fact that calls are being abandoned. And certainly for 999 calls, they would always get a call back. I'm not sure what the process is for 101, because it's 10 years since I was in a control room, but certainly those figures would be recorded somewhere.
Councillor Farley, do you wish to add anything further?
I'm wondering whether that's data that could be made available to the committee. I don't know if it is available or not.
If it's our view, I'll take that way as an action, and I'll inquire to see if we can get those figures for you, if that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chairman. Just two questions, if it's okay. The first was around both the questions are sort of surrounding trust with the Met and between residents across Hillingdon. And one of the things I picked up on, it says page 10 here, but it says page 40 on the presentation, is the body-worn videos. And now, it's a small amount, but 4.1% don't use the body-worn videos, and is there a particular reason why it's not 100% yet? And I just asked because concerning the sort of things that came out in the Barron's case review, perhaps those things are not seen on video. And is there any measures being taken currently that you're aware of to increase that to 100% going ahead? And then I'll go to my second question after, if that's okay.
Certainly. So a peer of mine at Chief Inspector level is reviewing and constantly reviewing all body-worn video figures. There is strong communication across the SLT at West Area, which will include Hillingdon, of course, to ensure that all response team officers and neighbourhood officers are wearing their body-worn video. They are assigned to them. There are community monitoring groups that can come in and have a look at body-worn video, and we will take great advice from the community around stop and search from the dipsometry on the body-worn video. But yes, we as leaders, certainly in West Area, are doing all we can to ensure that everybody, when they go out, uses their body-worn correctly, appropriately, to ensure it's the safety of the officers themselves, as well as to record the evidence, and also to ensure that there is a good and proper scrutiny for every stop and search or stop and account.
Councillor Gale, do you want to add anything further?
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. And my second question is just kind of regarding morale with the community and the police. My colleague, Councillor Smallwood, mentioned that there's in the stop and search demographics volume, it shows that there's quite a wide spread of people being stopped by ethnic appearance. But actually, when you go into the per thousand population, you see that those numbers distort in a sense, and the number of black and Asian people who get stop and searched massively increases per thousand population, and the number of people from a white background drops. But so I just wanted to clear that up firstly. But secondly, the bit that concerns me is the bottom bit where it says what are the outcomes per thousand population, and just by looking at the bar graph, the no further action bar is so much wider than any other bar there. And you know, these are what I presume are people who have been stopped, and then nothing else has happened after that point. So no cautions or nothing happens, and in a sense that's a good thing, because you know it accurately helps us track. Accurately helps you track crime and stops potential crimes happening in the future. But at the same time, that seems like a lot of people who are being stopped unnecessarily. And in terms of creating the morale with residents, I just wonder if there's anything that can be done. If there's anything that can be done, because it could create quite a negative relationship with the police, and especially with community police in the area who are there to look out in the area. But if they are sort of choosing people who are then nothing comes of it, what's the kind of criteria that makes you pick them, and how can that be refined in a sense so people don't feel there is low morale with the police? If you can comment on that, please. Thank you.
Certainly. So stop and search is one of many tools we have in the police to prevent crime, and it is a tactic that is used often. There is an extreme amount of caution taken with stop and search. You will probably see that stop and search figures over the last few years have gone down for good reason. You do find that members of the public in days gone by would actually help police. Now the first thing they'll do is take out their phone and video it. So it can put police officers of all ages off doing stop and search. But I take your point. But we do encourage that scrutiny of what we do. Some of those stop and searches may be a reaction to a Section 60 that is imposed by a minimum inspector after a period of extreme violence, and also it is a show of strength when we are stopping and searching people, and the community would appreciate that. I think it would be a different proposition if we weren't stopping and searching people. Then I think we could all agree that crime would likely to go up. There are also ways that we can encourage members of the public to come and view and see what we do and the body worn. There are other schemes as well which we can invite you on, like ride-alongs. You can come and experience what it's like to be with police officers and see what they have to put up with. I can't guarantee you everything that you'll see you'll like, but it's another way of trying to show to the community and the fact that we police by consent the difficulties that we as police officers, or certainly my teams, are experiencing every single day, particularly around stop and search.
Just a question to you, Chairman,
Yes, Tom.
if that's okay. If we could maybe make it part of the committee's remit to go on a ride-along, is that an option?
I believe that's already on the
Is it on there?
list,
Okay, brilliant.
the pending list of frontline visits. So
yeah,
perhaps
wonderful.
Yes, if you could liaise with Liz outside the meeting to arrange that, we would certainly welcome the opportunity to go out on this visit with you. Any other questions from members? Yes, Chief.
Chair, can I just say that, of course, we'll invite, there may be some restrictions of people coming out in terms of their health, their current disposition, and there'll certainly be a risk assessment, but I just want to make that quite clear from the outset. Just because people apply, it may not be that they're accepted. It is all done centrally. We can sponsor that, but it is one way of the community coming to see how we operate, but there will certainly be some restrictions around that.
Thank you very much. And just for clarity, the one I mentioned was just for members of this committee at present. It wasn't for wider members of the public, but we can take that offline and go through it. Any other questions before we move on? No? In that case, sorry, Jackie, do you want to say anything before we close?
No,
just the microphone, if you can.
All I was going to mention is that the priorities, the strategic priorities, have now been agreed by the Safer Hillingdon Partnership Board for 2023-24. How they're going to be delivered will be determined by the new Director for Community Safety and Enforcement when he takes up his post in May later on.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jackie, and to the police for your attendance this evening. It's been very valuable, and we'll see you again at our committee soon. You may leave if you wish to do so. Thank you. Item 7 is the Housing Living Standards, pages 43 to 56. Our officers attending this evening are Mark Billings, Michelle Greenidge, Gary Pentecost and Debbie Weller. Good evening to you all and welcome. As per the new way going forward, we will move straight to questions, so I'll invite questions from members, please. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. Question to you. Do we ask for photo evidence of unsuitable conditions before an inspection is arranged so an officer can determine the hazard, please? Thank you.
Chair, with the in-house LBH properties, all reported defects are allocated a damp mould and condensation reference. All defects are identified by the attending officer or operatives, and photographs are taken of the defects, and that informs our programme of works. So at the end of the process, we close the process is a constant process until conclusion of the issues, but we do have photographic evidence of all defects.
Councillor Sullivan, do you have a follow-up question at all? If I could just remind you to refer to the pages in the report if you are working from the report. Okay. Councillor Gardner.
Where shall I begin? I'm intrigued about the actual, what you regard as being adequate in terms of, don't look at me like that, Mark, in terms of private sector housing, because what I would term as adequate is definitely not. I mean, some of the things Councillor Avery's seen and some of the photographs and videos, they are not acceptable in any shape or form, but apparently they pass scrutiny. And I'm intrigued to know how you work that out and what sort of scale. I mean, there are things that people have. I live in the rented accommodation, you know I do, but if I had anything like some of the problems that I see in people's houses, I'd be straight up to the management agent and get it done straight away. I'm intrigued to know how, I don't know, I think I'm talking about private landlords here, they seem to be able to pull their wool over your operatives' eyes. And I've got this also thing about people say they've got gas safety checks. Well, how many people know what a gas safety check certificate looks like? I mean, we have gas safety checks in our properties every year, and I know exactly what they do. I've been given a rollicking by a plumber for several occasions because I got an extractor fan that I've covered up. I mean, and those things are noted on the gas safety checks. Yet I've seen people who've got houses that I deem not to be adequate, yet they've got decent gas safety checks. And I can't understand why whoever's doing it hasn't looked and seen that vents are blocked and fire hasn't got the air, the air circulating under some of the gas fires that people have. I'm just trying to work out what we as the authority can do to make private landlords adhere to what our standards are, because I mean some of the council properties I've been into are okay, but the ones that unfortunately most of my casework is private sector landlords. I'm trying to work out how we can get them to be on the same level. Just thought I'd give you that question to start off with.
So I'll ask Michelle just to talk about the housing and health and safety rating system, because obviously when we go into properties, there's an assessment that our officers carry out. Of course, with gas safety certificates, it's a legal requirement that every private rented property that has gas appliances has a valid gas safety certificate, and it's done every year. And of course, when we're inspecting a property, that's the first thing we'll look at to make sure that nothing has been identified of works that need to be done on that. Now we know some boilers are old. We're dealing with a number of inquiries at the moment where the boilers certainly we would like them replaced, but if it's working well and it's serviced well and it's got a current gas safety certificate, then actually that's the landlord's prerogative to sort of to keep that. But we'll certainly when all tenants get in touch with us and they've identified issues around their heating, around their gas, we'll ask for a copy of that certificate and we'll check it on their behalf. But Michelle, do you want to talk about the housing health and safety rating system quickly?
Yes, we call it the HHSRS. It's a risk-based evaluation tool that local authorities use to identify hazards in properties. And when our officers go in, they assess the properties against what the HHSRS says. So I know you might look at it and say, oh, but that's horrible. But the HHSRS, when they do the assessment, it may not come out as a Category 1 hazard or Category 2 hazard. So if it's not a Category 1 or Category 2 hazard, there's not much that we can do legally about that. We can speak to landlords, as we do, and we take into consideration the mental health, the well-being of the tenant, how they feel, because we understand it can be quite upsetting, because for me it might be fine, but obviously for you it's affecting your mental health. But it's something that we take into consideration. So the HHSRS looks into that as well. So there are 29 hazards. So it could be damp and mold, it could be excess cold. It looks at a variety of different things. It's something I can send to you if you want. The 29 hazards that it looks at. So if that's something that you want, I can send it to you if you want me to.
If you could share it with the wider committee, I think
yeah,
that would
I can,
be beneficial.
definitely.
Councillor, do you want to follow up?
Gas safety certificates. My dead brother's wife is the plumber for the housing card. It's all very weird. She's trained up and whatever. Now, there's no way in a million years, if I said to her, look, I'm not going to uncover that vent, but would you... She wouldn't do that. But I know that she's told me there are landlords that will get their mates to do the work and go, well, just, put it in. I mean, the bottom line is, I know that you can look at a gas safety certificate and go, yeah, okay, everything's been ticked off. But some of it has been done, I'm absolutely certain, by genuine plumbers or Corgi registered people, but they're mates of the landlords. And it's a bit like, ignore that bit and do that. I mean, is there any way we can check on that?
Well, they're now called gas safe, so they're no longer called Corgi registered, but there's a register that we can check. And the operative should be listed on that register. If they're listed on that register, whether they're friends of that person, or if they're friends, we can't do anything about that, but they have to be on that register. And that's what we consider, where we look to see if they're genuine engineers for gas safe.
No, that's not what I meant. Even if they are registered, if they are friends of the landlord, they could say, I mean, they could do a dodgy deal. I know, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, they may be registered or whatever, but if you say, oh, well, don't look at that, you know, do this, that and the other. When you go and you see the gas safety checks that you have to have annually, does whoever checks that they've got the gas safety check, do they then check all the different facilities in the house? I know it's a heavy duty thing, but you know, where they go and turn radiators on and off, and I mean, when they come and do mine, I get really annoyed because they move a lot of the furniture and this, that and the other. If you've seen my house, I don't like that, you know, but I just wonder if you would then go and double check.
Perhaps I can assist. On the gas safety acts relates to gas burning appliances, which are they're the legal aspect. Now, if engineers decide to flounce the law, not a lot we can do it unless it's identified. Actually, we just had one referred where the LBH engineers have attended to check a property for Michelle, just to confirm and clarify any issues. We've got limited numbers and we haven't got any legal responsibility over it, but Michelle has. So if it's flagged as an issue or concern, it's mainly the Gas Act is the Gas Act. It can prosecutions and imprisonment if people want to flounce that. There's also a requirement on all landlords now to have CO detectors in all properties, which we are compliant with, LBH are complying with, and all landlords need to comply with. It's a law as of the 1st of October. So I'm not sure how we answer the question with regards to people acting illegally, but if they do, they're taking a risk, which is not only their risk of imprisonment, but also the risk of their tenants' lives.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I've just gone on the wrong page, so let me just... So two points. One's quite a specific question, one's a bit more broad. Are officers confident that temporary accommodation, such as B&Bs, and also subject to some scrutiny to ensure that they comply, in maintaining a suitable standard? These are often used by the council to temporarily house residents and families and visitors to Hillingdon, and the reporting may be less forthcoming because people are only in there for a period of time and might just put up with it for a week or a few days. And then more broadly around the preventative work we do to stop things like damp and mould. So I can think of a set of council properties in my ward where there is a massive problem with the drains, the guttering at the moment, where it's just pouring off onto the walls. Now, if we went and cleared the guttering, that's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper than going and having to sort out a load of mould problems. So I just wondered how we deal with some of our preventative measures to avoid the escalation into more serious issues, for example, damp and mould.
I'll pick up the temporary accommodation question. So we've approximately got about, I would say, 350, 360 households in privately managed temporary accommodation at the moment. Over the last 6 months, we've actively inspected approximately 100 of those units directly. We have a new temporary accommodation framework system which requires all of the agents that we work with to enter a contract with the local authority about the standards of the properties they provide. Because of the way temporary accommodation can be used and how we book someone, it's not physically possible for us to visit every TA unit we use before we use it. Hence why we have the framework which agents then have to sign up to say, it's about repairing obligations, the standard of the property, etc. What we would expect in a property that we owned ourselves. We're also part of a Pan-London system called Setting the Standard, which is something that looks specifically at smaller accommodation, so shared HMOs that you add as the sort of there is a prevalent at the moment in Hillingdon and across London. And so we come at it from two angles, if that's the correct way of saying it. We have a Pan-London inspection service that goes into our shared accommodation and smaller studio flats. And the studio flat we determine as where the living room is the same room as the kitchen. It's an old-fashioned studio flat. And then we have in the council, in my service, we have what's called our landlord engagement team, which actively inspects our family-sized temporary accommodation. There's been an awful lot of press recently, especially over the last couple of weeks, around families in temporary accommodation. There was an article about Birmingham a few weeks ago on was it Panorama, I believe. The Guardian picked up an article at the weekend around families in hotels as well. And so it's absolutely key for us that we're going into these properties as if we've got a rolling program of inspections, and actually our homeless applicants are able to highlight issues to us. Sometimes because of the turnaround of the properties, mistakes do happen, and we'll be quick to speak to a landlord and ask them to rectify, maybe a fridge hasn't been cleaned, an oven hasn't been cleaned, etc. But it's key for us that actually our temporary accommodation is of a good standard. And as we say, unfortunately, our TA numbers are going up at the moment, and so we've got to try and be on the front foot as much as we can. Is that okay on the temporary accommodation?
Can I just come back on that point before they answer my other point? So it's great that we inspect the landlord and get their feedback, but what feedback do we get from the people that actually stayed in the temporary accommodation?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've got...
What do we actively do to say, was there mould, was there issues, even if they were just there for a week, so that we actually are getting live information from the people that are experiencing it?
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, every time the day they move in, they have an officer contact number with one of our temporary accommodation team that they can report any problems. We don't actively, at this stage, seek feedback at the end of a temporary accommodation placement, but that's something we can certainly look at doing.
It is this committee's job to scrutinise and suggest ideas. I think that is almost something that we should certainly be going back and, don't want to overcook the goose, but, feedback on your experience, should you win, wouldn't be hard or complicated.
We could look at options about how we could do something like that. I mean, we're unfortunately, because of the homeless demand at the moment, we're making we're making in excess of 50, 60 bookings into temporary accommodation per month. So we just got to, if we do think about how we could do that, it's just how we can do that effectively and efficiently, and be able to use the feedback appropriately. Yeah, is that? Yeah, good. Shall I move over to the damp and mould?
I'll take the guttering issues. We have got a reactive repair service which will deal with reported defects of gutters. What we are building is a cyclical program which targets areas. I've got one in mind where, which is a lot of trees in the area, gutters block up quite regularly. I could probably name the area it is, and we're trying to implement cyclical programs which clear those gutters every six months. And it's about trying to prioritise our programme of works to target where the most need. I think we're also noticing now that with some of the rainstorms we've had recently, gutters are becoming overwhelmed, which is not helped if they're blocked. So as part of our renewal programme, we are, when we're doing a roofing and gutters, soffits are being replaced, we're increasing the sizes of the gutters to take more of the downpours, because they're almost torrential rainstorms at the moment. So we're trying to increase the sizes. The old systems were 3 inch. We try and put them to 4 or bigger where possible. So we're trying to address it. If there's specific, if you could give us the details, and I'll get that checked. But I could probably tell you where they are.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is just regarding automatic opening vents on page 52. I was just wondering if there's a planning condition that can be applied for any future planning applications within the borough that propose medium or high-rise developments to include these.
Automatic air opening vents will be a requirement under the building regs normally for certain height of buildings. All of our high-rise sheltered and buildings over, I think it's 6 stories. Don't quote me on that. 6 stories will have AOVs. And what we're finding in some instances, they're under a maintenance regime, so they have to be fully operational as our building safety stroke fire safety servicing plans. So AOVs, there's also the government are moving to a requirement for all buildings all buildings have 2 staircases, both of which would have AOVs, which are automatic air vents to remove smoke from the building to aid the means of escape.
Councillor Gary?
Chairman, maybe it's something we can recommend given the increasing arson rates that we saw in our previous presentation from the police. Maybe that's something we could suggest. And I have another question, if that's okay. My next question is just following houses that are, I think, let by the council from private homeowners, so through things like housing associations, etc. A lot of the casework that I get from residents in my ward are not actually from council-owned properties, but properties that the council pay some sort of rent to a private landlord for through a housing association, etc. And these are the cases where mould becomes big issues and where damp become big issues, and they don't seem to be resolved because this middleman doesn't pick up on those cases. I was just wondering how often, if you could provide some information on how often they're inspected and by the council in between letting terms, because I understand some of these can be 5-10 year lets, and I've heard from some residents that in between this 5 or 10 years where these properties have been let out, they haven't been inspected even once. And I'm certain that probably isn't the case for the majority of them, but some clarity would be nice. Thank you.
I think are you referring to sort of to our housing association tenants that we have in the borough?
Yes.
Yeah, and so much as us as a social landlord, we have an active program of ensuring our stock is up to standard. Every registered housing association will have the same as well. In regards to enforcement of standards, and so if a housing association is maybe not doing what we would want them to do, then it's our private sector housing team who enforce on that. And so if you have anything in your post bag that you would like us to look at, then please do. And certainly, we sort of come across some landlords more than others, and we're quite happy to look into that.
Thank you. If I may ask a question as well, in regards to point 61 on page 55, in regards to the inspections, out of the 751 inspections of 498 individual properties, you did 300 as part of the Homes for Ukraine scheme. Firstly, I would congratulate officers on a very good effort on that part for a topic which is very emotive and unexpected, I suppose, and puts great pressure on us unnecessarily as an authority. But my question really is that is a substantial amount of the total number of inspections you carry out, and I'm just wondering if you had extra resources to accommodate that demand. If not, then I'm led to believe perhaps that there's a lot of capacity in your department which you could be doing a lot more of in terms of inspections. I assume this is not every year in, year out, and I'd like to see perhaps the previous years. I wouldn't, if you're doing 300 inspections as part of the Ukraine Homes scheme, out of 751, I imagine there'd be a lot less in the years prior to that. So going forward, this won't be year in, year out. Is there capacity in your department to be more proactive in inspecting additional properties?
We have at the moment, as part of the Ukraine government funding package, it pays for an officer, pays for resources in our team to be able to do that. But we can certainly provide details on previous years' numbers of visits that we've done.
Okay, and that one officer did the 300?
We didn't have the officer at the start. And so actually then it was distributed between all officers in the team, sort of, because it was obviously a crisis at the time. It was all hands to the pump as such, if that's the right technical phrase. Yeah. So we were using all officers from the team, and it was only once things had settled down that we brought a dedicated resource in, and were able then to move things across. So yes, absolutely. When the scheme first went live, we were putting all our officers in one basket there as such, and so yes, naturally then we had to then risk assess the rest of the complaints coming in order that we could still get out to high risk visits.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. HMOs. What areas of the borough are currently licensed by Hillingdon Council that are not covered by mandatory licensing, please? Thank you.
Can you say that again?
What areas of the borough are currently licensed by Hillingdon Council that are not covered by mandatory licensing?
Mandatory licensing covers the entire borough.
Yeah.
There are no areas in the borough that are exempt from HMO licensing.
Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. The general question, first of all, so tenants in private sector housing, there's the concern where there are issues, so damp, mould, etc., the fear that they have reporting it because they might suffer the consequences by a landlord. If where a report is made, is there any record kept as a follow-up to make sure that the tenant hasn't suffered as a consequence of reporting mould or damp or whatever it might be? Is that something that is followed post the alleged clean-up by the landlord?
Only if unfortunately if they approached us then to say that as a homeless applicant or the landlord has served notice. Of course, when the team go out and if a notice needs to be served, obviously there's an expectation that that's carried out and that would be followed up because obviously we've served a statutory notice. But actually, if then 6 months later the landlord evicts, if they come back to us, then yes, we would note that. But we don't specifically write out to all tenants who work where we know work has been done. It's due to just the numbers of cases we deal with. We probably wouldn't have the resources to be able to do that, unfortunately. But certainly I recognise your concern. There is the whole retaliatory eviction thing, and of course, if an enforcement notice has been served and it's live, then of course the landlord can't serve notice during that stage, and that's obviously what the legislation is there for. We don't, although we see cases from time to time, we don't see a lot of these type of situations. So maybe there is a bit of PR work that we need to do in the borough that actually sort of to move that myth as such that actually you should be reporting repair, you should be coming to us, and maybe going forward that's maybe perhaps an agenda item on our landlord forum as well. Actually, just reminding landlords just again that responsibility and how they communicate with their tenants, because what we find with a lot of landlords, is actually they want their tenants to come to them at an early stage. And actually, when a tenant comes to us, we'll ask them, have you spoken to your landlord? And on some occasions, it's, well, no, I haven't spoken to them yet. I thought I'd come to you first. And so maybe there's some work for us to do around the work we do with tenants and landlords in the borough, and we can take that forward through our website, through the team and our landlord forum work.
Councillor Farley, do you wish to have a follow-up?
I do have a follow-up and some other questions, but again, I'll see how it progresses. On page 51, item 38, it talks about density. Councillor Sullivan's already mentioned HMOs. I'm wondering when we're talking density, we're talking about like flats. Obviously HMOs have their own particular set of circumstances with people living on top of each other in joint panorama. I did watch the one that was on the other week with people living in a house that's been turned into 6 rooms with small showers and kitchens. So they come with their own difficulties. But in terms of the density, we're talking about certain areas of the borough. I'm wondering whether how that factors into your work and the prevalence, because it talks about prevalence within the report, but there's certain areas of the borough which are more denser than others and have different prescriptions to them, suburban, urban, and so forth. So I'm just wondering how. I think you said 8%. I think was the measure, but I'm just curious as to where exactly where we're talking about and the types of density we're talking about?
I think the figures quoted there are probably sort of prevalence things that are taken from national surveys. So it's kind of generalising really about where you find the rate of prevalence. And essentially it's saying that in areas that are generally more dense, so that's in terms of sort of overall population for the acreage or whatever in the area, those areas also tend to have other factors that would go alongside various issues. So there might be areas that are sort of less affluent, more deprived, potentially have more dwellings that are found in the private rented sector as opposed to own occupation. There might also be areas where you see more overcrowding, and those things kind of coalesce, I guess, to form greater issues. So I think those type of things do feed into the factors of where you would see the council taking more activity. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily programmed in the sense of, well, let's go and find the most dense areas and then arrange inspection programs there in quite that way. But certainly the areas where we know that we're more likely to find issues would also be those types of areas.
Thank you. Any other members before I go to Councillor Gardner? No? Councillor Gardner?
Page 27 and 28. No, I lie. Page 48, para 27. Saying that their progress meetings are held and updates provided to the Strategic Housing Board and an action plan incorporating and building on the work following the Spotlight report has been delivered. Is there any chance that we can see it?
Yeah. There's no problem sharing information. As I say, we've this live data which we're trying to resolve specific problems and reports.
Any others? Okay, Councillor Farley, do you want to finish?
Thank you, Chair. On page 52, item 41, the leaflet that's referenced, I did download this off the website. I'm not sure if this is the leaflet or it's something else.
The old one, yes, there is. There's a new leaflet. We'll get it. It should be on the website. So if that's still there.
I typed in damp and mould into search, and this is what I got.
Yeah, there may be an old link that needs to be removed, but certainly if you go on the website, if you go via the links, probably the search engine, it maybe needs to be resolved there. But there is we've designed a new leaflet. It's a very practical leaflet. We like to think it's cross tenure, and it goes into a lot of details around what a tenant can do to try and manage a problem that may be difficult, depending on how the build of their property, but also then what the council can do, or if you're a private tenant or a homeowner, what you can do. But we can share the latest leaflet. It's just been published in the last month or so.
Any further comments, Councillor Farley?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for that. Very good to see. Page 50, item 37, the tracking system. I'm not sure what that is exactly. Is that, are you talking about the portal, the website?
The tracking systems is used by the in-house repairs service. So we're actually specifically tracking any referral or request for a damp, mould or condensation defect. They're specifically tracked, as I mentioned to the councillors earlier, as to complete conclusion, which is a table. If you go to the bottom of that page, item 37, it's tracking since January. We've got 294 reports. This is obviously up till February. 294 reports of specific damp, mould or condensation issues, which we inspect and agree any necessary actions to resolve those problems or the cause of those damp, mould and condensation issues.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next item now, so thank you to the officers for their attendance. Is there any comments you wish to make based on the questions you've been that have been put forward to you this evening? No? Okay. Thank you very much. You may leave if you wish to do so. Our next item is the Hillingdon's Library Services Draft Strategy 22 to 27, the future of Harlington Library as well, pages 57 to 98. We have Darren here this evening, and we also have the Cabinet Member, Councillor Levy. Welcome to you. So we will start with questions from members. Are there any, please? I'm sure there's many. Councillor Farley.
I'd like to ask what the belief is by the council as to why why you believe people are not returning to libraries in the way that they were previously before COVID. Is it a matter of people don't feel safe, or is it something that you understand?
This is something that came up in the meeting I had with managers yesterday. We have the figures through for 22-23, which shows quite a good recovery compared to the previous financial year, of 49% increase on footfall, and a 24% increase in book borrowing, and 22% increase in new members. So the recovery is doing well, but there isn't any doubt that it's below pre-pandemic levels. There are a few reasons for this, and one is habits changing. So where people, they may visit their local library, but more often they'll visit the library close to where they work. Because of flexible working, they're not necessarily going to their nearest library to where they work. The library service is there for people who live, work and study in the borough, so not every person who uses the library is a resident of Hillingdon. There is a sense in some libraries that the older community is slightly more reluctant to go into public libraries. We also have limits on capacity, so that's a lasting measure against COVID. For our events and activities, we've had to cap them at a certain number to make sure that it's safe. So there's a few factors into why we're below pre-pandemic levels, and that's across certainly it's across London. I believe it's across the country. The other thing that we've noticed is Summer Reading Challenge. Hillingdon is generally one of the best performers for the Summer Reading Challenge, which is an initiative to keep children's reading levels up over the summer holidays. It's about half pre-pandemic levels, but we're still in the top 3 for London performance, which does suggest it's across the country that this recovery is happening, but it's slow.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Touching on Harlington Library, page 85, I think it is, point 4. So it references that 3 libraries had a lower active membership than Harlington Library. I don't know the history of Harlington Library in the sense of why it was put into a school or a school built around it. I don't know the circumstances of it. Obviously, it's obviously clear that students are using it, which is great. But I'm curious to know which of the 3 libraries have a lower membership, and sort of by what sort of margins we're talking.
I'll need to come back to you on the details. I've got it here, but I don't want to sort of waste your time by Mike's silence while I search for it. In terms of Harlington Library, it was originally sited not far from the school and was moved. I can't remember when it was moved to the school, and it's been at that school now for well over a decade. The intention is to move the library building further inside the school to 200 metres. I don't know, again, because it was before my time, but I don't know what the performance of Harlington Library was like before it was part of the school. But our suspicion is that being part of the school restricts in the general public's mind that it uses as a general public library. So in terms of active users, I suppose the other thing I should mention is that Harlington, by its size and by its stock levels, it's sort of a mid-sized library, and libraries, and again, I don't want to be quoted on this, but libraries with lower active memberships are likely to be small libraries. So among those user groups where we see low membership in Harlington, it's a bit of an anomaly.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if there's a question for you, Darren, or you, Councillor Lavery, but overall I think it's I think it's a sound proposal. My only my kind of question is around the tiered system. My question is there flexibility within the system to upgrade or downgrade a tier? Well, hopefully in this case upgrade. And how often is that going to be reviewed? The reason I ask is because I noticed that the flagship libraries, the top three, particularly in terms of maybe elderly people who want to park there or whatnot, people who can't rely on public transport, the parking at those three is probably the hardest of any of the libraries in Hillingdon, and actually some of the smaller ones people might find more accessible. So if later down the line, and that's just one of the things, if later down the line some of the smaller, some of the lower tier libraries, so to say, find an increase in footfall because of that, do they get upgraded to flagship, and how often is it reviewed?
I think I'll start with the tiers have been devised around sort of usage and visits, book borrowings and things of that nature. So the flagship libraries all have large footfalls, be it parking or not. They all have large footfalls and are very well used. The smaller libraries tend to serve a more local population, so you wouldn't necessarily drive to them. And part of the way we've designed libraries in Hillingdon is to make sure we do maintain that coverage right across the borough, and we don't wind up in a position where we have a few large libraries and that the only way you can get to them is by car or is by public transport. Actually, in most cases here, you've got a pretty good chance of walking to somewhere. We will look at this from time to time, and we're going to look at the statistics annually anyway, and see where these footfalls go. I think the point that came out from the last question, there has been, it is interesting that we appear to be getting more, I think Darren would describe it as focused visits to libraries, in the sense that book borrowing is performing better than footfall. So it appears that when people go, they know what they're going for. And that's subjective, I accept, but it does appear that's what's going on. So we will look at them over time to see whether the numbers do come back, and if that proves the case, we will adjust. Equally, of course, we may adjust the other way if numbers start to decline in a particular area. But we are committed, and absolutely committed, to the number of venues. Harlington is the only proposed closure, and that's because of its very particular circumstances, that it is effectively a public library, but actually it's operated as a school library. If you look at its usage and demographic, it's largely only school pupils who are using it. So actually the general population has effectively voted with its feet on that one. And therefore it's going to go back into the school, and the school will have a school library and they can use in their own way.
Councillor Gohill, just to... Yep.
Thank you. I raised that because in my ward we don't actually have a library, but it is the largest geographical area in the borough, so people do have to travel, be it to, usually Hayes End, Uxbridge, whichever end of the ward is closest to them. So I raised that. And I just have a second question, if that's okay. It's just regarding the, I forgot the name of it, the portable libraries, the library hubs. The mobile libraries, yeah, thank you, that one. I was just wondering, within those and within the existing libraries, if they could maybe implement a feedback system to the residents to see how they're finding it, just to add on to, once we've made these changes, we can ask people how they feel about it. Are they okay with the scheme as it is? And maybe we can get some more feedback from residents on that side of things.
I'm sure we will seek feedback, because that's always useful to inform future plans. So you raised mobile library in part of your question, but I didn't quite get the end of the question in that.
So as in, maybe in the mobile libraries we can ask people how they feel about the current library system, and if they think, I'm assuming mobile libraries are there as a sort of supplement, right? Yeah. So if they feel that supplement is sufficient to the existing library system, and maybe if we get some feedback from people who attend those.
Yeah, I mean the mobile library primarily serves people in parts of the community where maybe visiting a static library is difficult because of distance or because of mobility for the individual. We also have a home library service, so that goes into people's homes, and we see about 100 people who are housebound. I mean, anecdotally, satisfaction levels are very high across the library service and also with the mobile library. And we do use the mobile library as a sort of a representative for the library service as a whole in outreach settings, and so there's definitely a chance for us to collect feedback via the mobile.
Councillor Gardner.
I come from an age where you weren't supposed to make a noise when you went to the library. I really, really like Botwell Library. We do our surgeries there. It's absolutely fantastic. But what does worry me, and it's sort of related to, excuse me, housing conditions, is that the amount of young people in there doing their homework. Excuse me. We do our surgery in an area, and if you ask them why they're there, they haven't. Either their houses are overcrowded and they haven't got any room to study. Is there any way that we could get some sort of survey done amongst they're generally, I don't know, sort of late teens in there doing their work, but they're not messing about on the computers. I mean, because we have to walk through the area. I'm intrigued to know if we could find out why they're using it. I mean, so I use a computer in there. I've got one at home, but a lot of these kids clearly haven't, or they've got overcrowded conditions. Is there any way we can do that?
I think I'll start. I think you've probably hit the nail on the head, because it is evident, and one of the things we are doing, and I will continue to do, is to tailor the libraries to areas, because it is evident in Botville, for example, that we have a far greater demand for computers than we do in some of our other libraries. We also have quite a strong demand here in Uxbridge for computers, and quite a big band of them. So I think we haven't specifically asked them and checked them, but I think it's a reasonable assumption that they lack good facilities at home to be able to do homework privately, in a good space. And that's why we will continue to have both in the libraries. And as I say, some will have a lot more than others, but it is being driven by where we're seeing demand. And, Botwell is a good example. Uxbridge is another one. All of our libraries have something, but some of it is actually quite lightly used, and almost a question in time whether we actually need it or not. But certainly not in Botwell. But I'm sure we can find out more, but I suspect that's the answer we will almost certainly get if we do any further work on it.
Yep.
The other thing I have noticed in Botwell is the amount of activities they have. Again, it comes back to children, the facilities they've got at home, if they in a shared house and whatever. I mean, it was quite funny. I was trying to do a ward surgery with Councillor Curling, and in the next aisle bit, there were kids singing The Wheels on the Bus, and I ended up joining in with them, because I had worked with kids, so I'm not a completely juvenile, so I knew the words of it. But I just think, things like that show how necessary libraries are, because, there was a dad in there, and he'd had custody, or he got access to his children over the weekend, and he didn't know what to do with them, so he brought them in there. I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, every library does at least one story term per week, and we're looking to expand the range of what we do in terms of working with young people, taking in different requirements. Story times are great for socialisation, fine motor skills, parent-child bonding, and of course introduction to books at a very early age, and that being comfortable with books at a very early age. We've started to include simple sign language in story times as well. So that's and also that starts a child on a journey of becoming a library user for life. So they're absolutely key. A challenge for a public library is as you say, and it's true when I was growing up in Hillingdon as well, you had to be quiet when you went to a library, and some people still expect that. So when they hear the wheels on the bus, they're not always as pleased as you are. But we are. We think it's a great thing that libraries being used that much, and that's seen as a really key thing for a child's development.
Thank you. The strategy document refers on page 14 to relocating libraries to new buildings. Have you identified any at present that you're looking to perhaps relocate?
We do. We are investigating some at the moment, but I'm not ready to put those in public domain at this point because they will come forward as cabinet papers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the proposed tiered opening hours, I'm a bit concerned. Oak Farm Libraries, two-tier, the change in opening hours are 10 to 7, and on Saturday 10 to 4, and our council surgeries are there. So we start at 9:30. So if this comes into existence,
can you start at 10? Sorry, I was going to say the obvious. Is that critical?
Well, it's been ongoing for a while, so and a lot of activities start at 9 o'clock in libraries.
Yeah, I think the balance we have to strike, and you know, we will look at this as time evolves. The balance we have to strike is the longer we're open, that will drive the costs up because we will have to staff it for longer. My experience, interestingly enough, my experience of Saturday mornings is slightly different. I worked here in Uxbridge, nothing to do with the library, but in Uxbridge town centre on Saturday morning, and to be honest, the place didn't move much before 10. You know, from 9 till 10 was fairly kind of, you know, slow. 10 onwards, 10 till about 2, 3 o'clock in Saturdays tends to be the really busy time in most places. So that's kind of the logic we're working with. So maybe you get half an hour's lay-in. That's quite good.
Any follow-up? Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Just touch on the opening times and review, and whether there's not any statistics up until now, as you've been monitoring post-COVID, with seasonality for GCSEs, for children studying. Would there be, again, you've mentioned it, but I just sort of throw that into the mix, that is sort of where you've got kids using the libraries. It's a particular issue that they don't sort of get stopped at lunchtime and then have to sort of be kicked out if they're, you know, heavily engaged in their studies.
Yeah, the only authority I'm aware of that increases its opening times around study is Ealing, and so they temporarily increase their hours. But they're starting from quite a low base. Ealing have very low opening hours, so the increases are probably sort of more wearable. I think what we're trying to do is make sure we've got consistency across the year, because it's true there is a spike of students using libraries. If you go in now, if you go in now over the Easter holidays, it's begun, and that will be the case right up until exams start. But right through the year, the library is used by older people, by children and families, and so we want to make sure that we have a sort of a good level of access day in, day out. Now, the lunchtime closures, we've been backwards and forwards on the lunchtime closures because that isn't in common use in, for example, neighbouring libraries. But where they've chosen to shorten their hours, some libraries are either closed entirely on more than one day per week, or they've, and we're using, I think this is Ealing again, will have like 12 to 5. But that means that people that want to visit in the mornings, and there tends to be a good lot of use in the mornings and a good lot of use after school, it means that people can't visit in the mornings. We still need to make sure that staff have lunch. We need to make sure that we can cover that lunch period, and it is quite difficult to cover a lunch period, which tends to be the quietest time of day as well. So I worked in, I did a bit of back to the floor after Christmas at South Rysup Library, and there were a couple of students in then. In the majority of cases, where we close for lunch, people are I don't want to say they're happy with it, but they certainly accept it. There have been no complaints. Since we've opened the busiest libraries through lunch, there have been no complaints at all about libraries that close at lunch. And so I think it can offer quite a nice break during the day when you're studying to be able to go off and stretch your legs for an hour and then come back for another 3 hours of study. I'm not trying to sell that as a because I think it's a choice we made to make sure we have morning and afternoon opening.
Okay. Councillor Small.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points really. One around how we increase the digital footprint that we have. So I'm thinking about e-books and other sort of like the online offering. I certainly know that some people that I've spoken to are less regular visitors to library because they can get it up on their iPad or their tablet, which is obviously, as we move into a more digital world, that is. But also, I wanted to understand how Hillingdon sees libraries as community hubs. One of the most interesting meetings I've had since becoming a councillor was with a high street bank, who are interested in potentially in a part of the borough where they didn't have a footprint of a physical building, is going in and being able to offer banking to people in that area, in that library, a certain day of the week. Could we also look at the police using? I know in other boroughs the police are using libraries as potential places to hold surgeries for people, or for knowing that someone will be there at a certain time to come and report crimes. I think there's loads of other things. I think we can be incredibly imaginative here in Hillingdon, that a library isn't just somewhere that you go and send an email, do a bit of studying or read a book. They can actually become these incredible community hubs, and if we challenge ourselves, I think we can be incredibly innovative, and I'd just be interested in to see what sort of stuff for that is already in place and where we're going in the future.
In terms of libraries, we see libraries as an essential part of community hubs. I mean, the council has numerous strategies out to consultation at the moment, one of which is family hubs and the like. And one of the things that we are looking at, and it's slightly broader than libraries at the moment, is making the best use of the assets we've got in every community. Now, we're committed to keeping the libraries in communities. Now, if we can get other services to use them, be they council services, be there others, and you raised the banking idea, and I know that's being actively looked at by my officer team. You heard a presentation from the police earlier. The new superintendent is on my list to meet, and those are the sorts of issues I will be looking to explore with the police as to how they make their presence. And I know some of them have used libraries in the past, but how they actually maintain their community presence. But the more things we can get going on in a library, it's actually good for the library service, because one, it means the building's used, and there's people in there, which has got to be good news. But it also means if people are there, there is then a chance that they will borrow books, look at online offering, use the PCs, etc. So if you get them in the building, you've got, no matter how they arrived in that building or what they arrived to originally do, there is a chance then they'll use more services. So we absolutely will want to work with all parts of the council as to whether it can use the library buildings more. One of the things some will have heard me talk about in the past is it's not, we can get hung up on what the building is. It's what use we can make of it that's the absolute key. And we've got children in the buildings doing homework, using computers. That's fantastic. We have the wheels on the bus going on, and that's but these are all. And we also one of the things we don't publicise enough, and it's a challenge I have out there, is the number of additional activities that go on in libraries already for various groups across the week and across the months. Now, you can find them. There are lists of them in various places, and one of the things we do need to do is to draw that together so it's actually more findable. Now, Dan quite rightly said some of them to get slightly curtailed in terms of COVID and numbers and so forth. But actually, if you look at, certainly when I was in Uxbridge Library a few weeks ago, and I was talking to the manager there, and they were listing the range of things that go on there across the week, and it's quite surprising for all sorts of groups. And it can be a way for people, if you take some of the elderly who may be lonely, groups meeting in libraries can be a way of them actually getting out and meeting people and seeing people, as well as those who have got their children. So, Dan, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, please. If I could just add something on the online resources, the digital offer. So in last financial year, we saw an increase on BorrowBox, which is the downloadable e-books and e-audiobooks. That was a 2% increase on the previous financial year, which is it's a great figure to sustain, because it really peaked during COVID because it's the only way to get books, and then so to sustain that is really good news. One of the issues we have with BorrowBox, not with BorrowBox, they're a great supplier, but with data rights management, is there are far fewer digital books available for libraries than there are printed books. Although we have really good take-up of BorrowBox, I think it was about 30,000 downloads last financial year, we don't have anything near the range that we do in physical printed books. Press Reader is an online resource for newspapers and magazines, and that had over 220,000 impressions last financial year, which is an 8% increase on the last financial year. And Press Reader has actually replaced physical newspapers and magazines, probably because there is so much more choice there. There's an ongoing battle among library services and digital rights management of e-books. And if we make progress on there, hopefully we can sort of increase that range to look something like the physical offer. And just to add, in terms of banks using libraries, we do have HSBC currently piloting use of Eastcote Library. We're looking to have Barclays at Rice Manor. We've spoken to Barclays about Rice Manor. And we're working with in the council with the adolescent development team. They're quite interested in using some of our buildings for some of their activities. So that's some of the some recent examples of some of the ongoing work we're doing with the community.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Gardner?
It's a suggestion, actually. Can all libraries be made designated safe spaces as well, where people can go for help? And the reason I say that is because of what I do, basically. The librarians in Botwell, if somebody comes in crisis, they'll give me a bell, and then I've given them my home number, and they can do that. But I thought it would be ideal if there's some sort of thing where people know that they can go in and get help. I mean, I don't know whether there is a back door to the library and things like that, but it might be worthwhile finding out if the librarians, the library staff will be agreeable to it, because it might mean them having to call the police or whatever. It's just a suggestion.
No, thank you. I mean, informally, we are and we do, and I'm aware of my own experience frontline and also more recent experience of where people have gone to a library for help to escape an abusive partner or to report a concern, someone who's come in and has been a victim of crime. So informally we do that. What I can do is look at what formal routes there are to consolidating that position. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion we'll take forward. Yeah.
I cannot see any other indications to ask questions, so at this point I would invite Councillor Lavery and Darren to summarise and give any comments they wish to make based on what they've heard this evening.
No, I thank the committee for their questions and their support of the strategy, because we haven't heard anything raised that's given us concerns. So thank you for having us here, and I certainly will be pleased to come back if I'm invited for other topics in the future.
Consider it an open invitation, Councillor Lavery.
Well, I'm not. I covered that one.
But thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you, Dan, for your attendance as well.
Sorry, could I just thought I'd like to let you know the consultation closes this Sunday. Would you be interested just to know how many?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Stats, yeah.
So we've had 753 responses to the main consultation about strategy and hours, and 78 on the Hillingdon Library consultation, with a few days left, and we've tweeted today to remind people that it closes Sunday.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
You may leave if you wish to do so. We're not going to be much longer, to be honest. So we now move on to the forward plan. Councillor Gardner, thank you. The next item, and the final one, is the work programme, pages 111 to 114. Are we happy with that? Thank you very much. That concludes our business this evening. Have a safe journey home. Good night.